A recent study by executive research firm EMA Partners has found that in FY20, only 6 of the top 250 company CEOs are women, out of which 3 are founders or belong to the families of promoters. And according to the Global Gender Gap Report 2020, it is going to take another 100 years to achieve gender equality based on the current rate of progress that we all have. Isn't it shocking? Well, in fact, this is the reason why we are discussing this very important issue of gender diversity at workplace on India Revival Mission. What is it that can be done to address this issue? Let's find out on this episode of India Revival Mission on Times Network. I'm Hina Gambhir. Joining me today is Kranti Gada, who is COO Shimaru Entertainment. We have with us Niranjan Hiranandani, co-founder and managing director Hiranandani Group. We have Naina Lal Kidwai, past president FICCI and chairman Advent India Advisory Board. We also have with us Sanjeev Kapoor, former COO Spicer. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on India Revival Mission. At least on the show, there is no gender gap. There are 2 female guests and there are 2 male guests. So that was the first thing I wanted to ensure. But let me begin this discussion with you, Ms. Naina. Why are there so few women CEOs in India?
You know, Hina, it is always depressing to see statistics such as this. And what is even more significant is that there's been a decline. We actually looked better a couple of years ago by the same report. So clearly, we do have issues. I can only hope that, you know, data is usually taken at a point of time. And what would be very critical to see is what does the pipeline look at? So we may just have a case where CEOs have dropped off because people finish their terms and the next line of CEOs hasn't come up. But hopefully there are enough in the pool that may come up. So I can only, it's not clear to me why this would be, except that companies may have dropped the ball on this. And where we have set our heart and mind to it, so if you look at the success now of women on boards, the regulation of 2013, where women were just 5% on boards, today at 17%, which is still lower than the global average of 27%, but is increasing. It shows that with the right regulatory action, we can get the right result. But at the executive level, I think a good trend that women founders are coming through the system, but not so good news in terms of women professionals. And I think there is much to be done at the corporate level to ensure this. And I just want to add that COVID itself has not helped the cause of women because working from home, there are several studies that are showing that women have had a much tougher time. They are more likely, 1.5 times more likely to have spent 3 to 4 hours on work to do with children and caregiving and home, being a home manager than the fathers at home might have been, which suggests that there isn't an equal sharing of the load that is needed to be shared at home.
Very interesting. Mr. Sanjeev Kapoor, as Ms. Naina Lal Kidwai was mentioning that, you know, the regulation has led to a lot of change, but at the executive level, a lot needs to be done. I was just looking at some other numbers as well, at least as far as the board of directors are concerned. The situation is slightly better. In March 2020, 777 women directors are there out of a total of about 4,657. Of course, the gap is still huge. But do these numbers startle you, especially at the executive level?
Well, they're certainly not good numbers. I think there's a lot that needs to be done to get women to have them fairly represented on boards in management teams. In terms of the board, though, there's a regulation that says there needs to be 1 female board member in most public companies. However, there's a trend where the female board member tends to be a relative of the promoter. So I think if the regulation could change so that it's an independent board member, and also, if you can have 2 female board members rather than 1 total present, I think that would make a lot of difference. In terms of management teams, what I've seen in my experience is that the staffing committees, etc., of large corporate tend to be male-dominated. And that's where a lot of the policies are made regarding staff welfare benefit, maternity leave, so on and so forth. And I think at least at the appropriate committees, perhaps companies should have 50-50 representation so that women can have a fair share of voice and can speak from their direct point of view on what makes sense in terms of maternity policies, why women are dropping out of the ladder, so to speak, and not let men make all the decisions.
Okay. Mr. Hiranandani, what is your assessment? Because, despite rising awareness, despite more access to education, and despite the entire country talking about women empowerment, in the last 4 years specifically, the representation of women has dropped considerably. What could be the reason according to you?
That's a very short-term phenomena, and I agree with Naina on that. I don't think we should judge that short-term phenomena as a long-term idea thought. But what has really happened is that women are increasingly getting better roles. May not be at the director's level, but I can assure you that at many other levels of not the CEO's level, but at the next level, there is a lot happening, and we do get a lot more senior executives which are coming into the position. That's point number one. Point number two, a woman is more likely to opt to take care of the family than a man in a situation where the family has to be taken care of. So a lot of people at the mid-level are willing to sacrifice some time for a child or any other thing, or for their looking after the mother-in-law, looking after the other relative in the Indian scenario, which is not happening to the male person. So somehow that's kind of a tradition which has happened, and a woman is willing to do on her own a bigger sacrifice. Third, the international norm is also different, in the sense that internationally also, if you look at the CEOs, number of CEOs that you have in the companies at the top level, the numbers for the male are definitely disproportionate. So I think we are getting there. India has seen a difference. We've had a woman prime minister, we've had the woman president. Even before the United States had a woman prime minister, president, which they don't have even till today, but we have had. We've also had women president. All those things have happened in our country. And Naina, where she was in ICICI, we had 5 women at the next level in ICICI who were kind of vying for the top position. So, you had a lot of people at the next level. So it's happening all over. But actually, to say that we are going backwards, I don't agree. It could be a short-term phenomena, but as correctly said that my previous speaker, that a person would even drop off during the COVID period. The woman would be more likely to drop off rather than a man to take care of the home and hearth and all those things. So it's I think a psyche of the Indian mind more than anything else, and social behavior, which either puts a woman at a different disadvantage in this situation rather than being doing. And of course, there are many spouses who don't want the women to go ahead of the man.
So, Ms. Kranti, is it that, women are willing to sacrifice, or they are being told that they have to sacrifice? And that's the reason why, like Mr. Hiranandani was mentioning, that, women are getting better roles, but not at the CEO level. Definitely for other positions, we do have women.
Thank you for having me, Hina. So I want to start by saying that the gender bias took 5,000 years to set. How do we expect it to change in 100 years? What is happening in the boardrooms today is a result of the upbringing, 25 or 30. No. There's a lot of positive, Hina. I want to say that. What is happening in the boardroom today is the result of the upbringing 40 years back.
Okay.
I completely agree with Mr. Hiranandani that do not look at the last few years. Look at it as a continuum a lot of good stuff is happening, and a lot of good stuff needs to happen. Outside of hard-coded regulation, like, defining norms, I think a lot of softer stuff still needs to happen. For example, role modeling, counseling women how to deal with the periods of life where they need to probably give a little bit more attention to their families, and how to come back after that. I think we can get women to stick around for a lot of the senior roles just by role modeling and counseling them, hand-holding them on how to handle their situations in their personal lives. See, physically and emotionally, women are different from men. We have to accept it, and hence there are certain things at home only women will be able to do. And I think we shouldn't shy away from that fact. We have to embrace that fact. And we have to help the women move through those phases and come back to the working force. I also completely agree with Mr. Hiranandani when he says that a lot of the senior women or mid-level women drop out for family responsibilities, or also when their spouse is doing exceedingly well, the women says she will take a back seat. I think here we need to inspire the women to continue fulfilling themselves personally at work while handling their family duties.
And I think in that
So
case, the
I would
role
say
of
there are a lot of softer aspects.
Okay. Role models become really important, and we already have a role model here on the panel, Naina Lal Kidwai, who is an inspiration to many women who are working in the corporate sector. Ms. Kidwai, I want to ask you, did you have to face any kind of a challenge, when you reached that position of power? Tell us about your story, any anecdote that you can share with us.
This would take the whole day, because the time when I entered the workplace, there were very few role models. And indeed, society which still remains an issue, does not readily accept that women at work is the norm. And I think the social changes, and Kranti has picked up some very interesting points, but it's not just about women and our mindset. It is about society around us and the expectations of society. When your mother-in-law, and the people around you expect you to be the caregiver and the one that is responsible for being the home manager, you end up having to bear that burden. And we've seen through COVID now that there are a number of studies which have shown that women have spent 3 to 4 hours more time than their husbands, or indeed at the family level, 3 to 4 hours a day on issues to do with children, schooling, home managers, etc. Now, you're having to juggle that with work. So I think first and foremost, society, the men and not just the women, have to change their mindset. And that is changing, but it's changing very slowly. I think as we go forward at the workplace, we have to make sure that companies are not just treating this as a tick box exercise. The DNA of the organization has to know and want diversity, because it brings strength into an organization. And there are no roles that women can't do. We see engineering companies. I believe Cummins India now has 30% of its operations team, an engineering company, are women. I sit on the CIPLA board. 3 of the key management executive committee, management council members, head of technical operations, head of quality, head of HR are women. So the companies that have the right DNA, the right culture, have shown that it can be done.
So it's the culture
others are
of
too
a
busy
company,
making excuses.
The culture of a company, that is very, very important as well. I think Ms. Kranti also wanted to make a point. She was, indicating to me. Yes, Ms. Kranti, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on Naina ji's point that, a lot of work has to be done at the society level and at the corporate level, and it has to go hand in hand. And, definitely the culture of the organization makes a very big difference. In my personal opinion, I feel our generation of women, and maybe for the next 20 years, women will have to take charge of their careers and their lives. We'll have to put our foot down and we'll have to make things happen. Maybe we have to take on 1.5 persons responsibility. But for these generations right now, expecting society to change overnight is not going to happen. We'll have to be the conduit of change ourselves.
Mr. Sanjeev Kapoor, now I want to ask you specifically, do you think the need of the hour is also to perhaps make the work culture slightly better?
Right. So I come from an industry where the majority of the staff are women, the airline industry. More than 50% of both SpiceJet and Vistara was women. Interestingly, in the pilot community, India has the highest number of female commercial pilots in the world by a factor of 2 or 3.
But very few CEOs, very few COOs.
So I'm getting to that. So the fact that a woman can be a pilot, take leave, have a child, come back and resume her career as a pilot without missing a step is the reason why they become senior pilot captains and why that career path is successful. But in management, the challenge I see is if a woman chooses to take leave, to have a child, and then wants to come back and resume the path she was on, often that path is closed. And that is why I got back to staff committee, maternity leave policies, etc., where women have to not be forced to take a choice that, look, if I take leave to have a child, I can no longer come back to a similar seniority or role that I had before. I'll be given something else because law requires some hire me back. But I'm no longer going to be on the fast track anymore. I'm now on the fast track. And that's the culture with corporate. How they view management, how they view maternity leave, how they view women with children, which has to change. You see, and if it can happen to the pilots, why can it not happen to management as well? As long as we encourage women to come back after they were on.
Absolutely. Mr. Hiranandani, now, the sense that we all get is that it can't change overnight, but something needs to be done for it to change. We've seen examples of women joining back, their work soon after delivering a baby as well, very same day. We've got several examples and many came especially during coronavirus pandemic as well. Just a quick, out-of-the-box solution that you can think of that can be implemented today in India's corporate sector so that at least the change begins.
I agree with Sanjeev completely. In sectors where women are taking a majority, like for instance, he mentioned about, Naina and others mentioned about engineering section to be done. But if you look at civil engineering, I'm not able to get women into the civil engineering field. But in the IT, computers and other parts of it, women do rule the roast. There are a large number of them who would love to get into it, and they're getting into it in huge numbers. So I think it's a combination of three things. Number one, statutory, as was mentioned, that you slowly bring up the statutory position so well it becomes compulsory. Second, the social norms start changing by example, like we have in the case of Naina. And others, many others, of course, who have done tremendously well in terms of the field and encourage the rest of the people as best examples. And the third is actually to really bring about disbursement of knowledge like you are doing in this program just now, and kind of bring about encouragement to people like there and people like Kranti at a younger age, being able to take a leadership role in her company and others. So whether it's a promoter-owned company, professional-owned company, doesn't matter. As long as best examples keep getting thrown up, so we will get differences to take place and all. Luckily for us, the Indian society is mentally ready. Because we have had leadership roles in all the segments already, there are best examples already available. So as I mentioned about the Prime Minister, the President of India, CEOs of so many companies are being women, but not enough. I agree. But it's a good beginning in terms of doing whatever it is. And I agree with Sanjeev on the point that if the women pilot could be there and take up that leadership role. But we have to understand, the man at the moment appears to be more aggressive when he wants to move up the value chain. That's a thing which is there seen across the board. A woman is not as aggressive at this point of time in order to take the leadership role. So the women themselves will also have to learn from people like Naina, to actually put the accelerator, press the accelerator and push themselves up also, not only competing among women, but competing among all the people, including all the men in the company. And that's a different ballgame completely.
Okay.
It depends on them also to do this thing. So
I give
all
you-
the three combinations which will help.
Okay, I give you the last word, Ms. Naina. Is it the time now to demand it instead of waiting for some kind of a regulation to come that will probably, make it mandatory for the companies to have this much percentage of representation of women in a certain kind of role?
I think, as Niranjan said and Kranti too, that women do have to take their career into their hands. And yes, a degree of aggression, a degree of ensuring that they get their rightful place is very important. In a book I'd put together of 30 women CEOs, this was a common message, that women don't negotiate hard enough. And companies and people see women who are ambitious as just not right, which is on both sides needing change. Companies need to help women be ambitious and fight for their rights in a decent but balanced way, but certainly
Right.
make sure that they get their dues, and women themselves to take their career into their own hands. So we need to move in both spaces. Having said that, I think it's equally important that the organization provides a structure which is continuously analyzing why it's not happening, communicating its own DNA and support to diversity, and why it wants the women in the workplace. Not just that it wants women, but why it needs women in the workplace. Basically, for a healthier, better, more thinking organization.
Thank you very much. In fact, it was wonderful speaking with all of you and get your perspective on this very important issue of gender gap at the top level specifically, which still is a reality as far as India Inc. is concerned. But there is a possibility that if there is a change in the mindset or at all levels, perhaps we could see the numbers getting slightly better the next few years. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on India Revival Mission.